Welcome to Native Yoga Toddcast. So happy you are here. My goal with this channel is to bring inspirational speakers to the mic in the field of yoga, massage, bodywork, and beyond. Follow us at Native Yoga and check us out at nativeyogacenter.com. All right, let's begin. Welcome to Native Yoga Toddcast. I'm your host, Tom McLaughlin. Today, I'm honored to sit down with Salim Rollins, the co-director of Synergy Yoga, an international wellness organization dedicated to community upliftment through yoga, Thai bodywork, and transformative retreats around the world. From East Africa to Peru, Tulum, and beyond, Salim's path weaves together yoga, Capoeira Angola, and cultural exchange, rooted in a deep commitment to healing and empowerment. He is based in Nairobi, Kenya. He's also the founder of the Nuku Cultural Center in Nairobi, where he helps young people discover strength and purpose through movement and the arts. In our conversation, we explore how yoga and travel can become tools for transformation, how to hold space for authentic cultural connection, and what it really means to live in, quote, synergy with ourselves, our communities, and the world around us. Go ahead and check out Salim on his website, synergy.yoga. Follow him on Instagram at Salim_Rollins. Also, you can see his NGO that he has in Nairobi at Inuku_cultural_center. The links are in the description. Click there. Also, reference episode number 232 with Francisco Morales. And Francisco and Salim are partners in Synergy.yoga, so you can get the full picture. I got really good vibes off these guys, and if you're looking for a cultural retreat in either of these locations, Africa, Peru, or Tulum, I really recommend you checking them out. Have a listen, go see their website. I really, I hope I want to go actually. I can't, All right. On that note, let's go ahead and dive in. I'm honored to have this opportunity to meet and speak with Salim Rollins. Salim, thank you so much for joining me today. I believe you're in Nairobi, Kenya. Is that correct?
I am.
Amazing. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. It's evening time here, morning time on the East Coast. I didn't ask where you are actually, Todd.
Yeah, I'm in a town called Juno Beach, Florida. So about an hour and a half north of Miami on the east side of Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're 7 hours ahead of East Coast. I'm a New Yorker from suburbs of New York, so I'm used to East Coast time and California time, West Coast as well.
Got it. At what age were you when you moved to Africa?
What age was I? Good question. Let me do the math now. Would have been 38, I believe. Is that right?
Cool.
Yes, I was 38.
What drew you? What was the impetus and or story behind you moving from New York, California to Africa?
Yeah, so I met my ex-wife in Brooklyn, New York. She was an NYU student. I was living in Brooklyn, working, training. Formerly had been in university in Northern California, UC Santa Cruz. So I zigzagged quite a bit in my life, kind of between the coasts. And we met there, fell in love, got married, and actually moved to Kenya briefly, but then realized we really should. We conceived right away, 6 months after marriage, conceived our firstborn in Nairobi, Kenya, probably 1 or 2 days after moving here, and realized that we should get my kid's mom's immigration in the U.S. sorted before really settling. So we moved to the Bay Area, to Oakland, California, and had our 2 kids born there. We lived there for 5 years. We were both working and parenting and figuring out, the early stages of parenthood and relationships and all that. And we always had it in mind to move back to Kenya. But we had to get my kid's mom's citizenship, U.S. citizenship, sorted out. So probably a year and a half after she received citizenship, we moved back to Kenya. And that was in 2014 that we moved here.
Cool. What do you think? What was the move like? Did you love it right away? Did you have rose-colored glasses at first that then faded into a different shade? What is your experience?
My experience in Kenya. So many kind of layers and chapters. My first experience was spending 5.5 months here before we had children. So, like I said, we conceived, but I really got the opportunity to experience living here. This was back in 2008. So, by the time we made the permanent move here, or semi-permanent, I don't know that I'll be here forever, but I had experienced Nairobi and I was familiar with it. I knew how to drive here. I had a sense of the geography and the culture, the pace. I understood kind of how to move here. In terms of the rose-colored glasses, yeah, I think that certainly living on the continent of Africa was always, I had traveled to Africa previously on a couple of occasions. I had been to Ghana, I had been to Cape Verde. So I had had some experiences on the continent. And I think that in general, the way of life, the culture, I'd say the values of Kenya were in and still are in more alignment than my experience living in the US. So, of course, there are a lot of things that are challenging and problematic here, like everywhere. But in general, that still holds true. I think that, and certainly by the time we had children, it was great having our children raised in Oakland their first 4 and 5 years, and then we were ready to raise them for some of those formative years over here for various reasons. But I'll name a couple of them. I think that the pace of life here, being a little bit slower, was something that that resonated with us. Having a large family base in Nairobi, my kid's mom, who we co-parent now and have a very good relationship. We do things together, we dine together, we talk as regularly. But the pace of life, I think the family, the culture, and when I say the culture, in general, I think there's less mental health issues here than in the US. In fact, I know that's true, having lived here. And, there's less violence in general. We don't really have school shootings and things like that. So I think raising our children in this space resonated with us and who we are as people. And also, I think being in a country as well where it's not hyper racialized, which for, people of color, African American people, our children are mixed, American and Kenyan. The conversations come back so much to these kind of large things that people wrestle with in the US, and I think they should be wrestling with them, but it's just, I think, can be a constant stressor that you don't think about until you step outside of it and come to a place where maybe that's not so much of a focal point of what people are talking about or experiencing. Also, for our children to be able to see people that look like them in governments and in their teachers and all of that really, I think, influences their self-esteem, their vision for what and who they can become as people. And that's, as we know, that's an ongoing struggle in the U.S.
Great point, Salim. That's fascinating. I hear ya. I was talking with someone the other day that they traveled overseas and the feeling, I believe they were in Europe, the Europeans, I think this was Italy, were like really nervous about coming to the US. They said, no, that sounds too scary over there. And so being an American and I hear that, I think, wow, because I'm just living my life and it's so fascinating, right? Because like the amount of things that we hear about just becomes this like pervasive background noise that almost is normalized over time. So it's interesting that, to hear your perspective about being on a different cultural and different part of the planet that you're like, whoa, that actually is pretty intense over there. So it's fascinating, man. Oh my gosh. I have had a chance to go to Africa into Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. and I had an incredible experience. I found Africa to be an amazing place. I loved it.
Yeah.
I've never been to Kenya. I've always had the dream of going.
Yeah.
What was your first experience with yoga, and what role does yoga play in your life today?
First experience with yoga probably would have been in high school. I was drawn towards Eastern philosophy and practices. So I was starting to read about Taoism. I was starting to look at the food that I put in my body, and I started fasting and just experimenting with things. I believe my first ex- no, I'll go back before high school. First experience that I remember of yoga, actually, I went to the oldest Montessori school in the U.S., Whitby School in Greenwich, Connecticut. I'm from White Plains, New York, so I would, drive out there. We had a bus with kids from my neighborhood who'd go out to these different private schools in Connecticut. And my closest friend, Alex Papp, who I reconnected with recently, his father would practice in their living room. So I remember
Wow.
seeing his dad practice. I was probably, like 11 years old, 10 years old, seeing his father practice in the living room. And then Alex gave me a lesson. I remember this at their like ski, probably timeshare or something like
Yeah.
that, Stratton Mountain, Vermont. So Alex gave me a yoga class. He taught me yoga. I mean, he was at that time we're probably like 13, 12-ish, 13. And that's my first memory. Then in high school, I kind of circled back. I didn't keep the practice or anything, but that's my first memory of it. And then high school, I believe it was Swami Muktananda's book. I don't remember the title. He might have a book, Be Here Now, or something like that. And I read that book, and it was really impressionable. So that's my first memory. And then I was doing some meditation. I was sitting in high school as well, so I was starting to practice in that form, not asana, in high school. And then in university at UC Santa Cruz is when Capoeira actually came to me. And soon after that, Capoeira Angola, just a particular lineage and branch of Capoeira. And I started practicing that intensely in university. I spent most of a year in Brazil and got credit for that in university. And after about 4 years of training, my body started to let me know this training's intense, and I needed something to balance out my training, and that's when I looked to yoga in the year 2000. And by that time, I had moved back to New York City. I was living in New York then, so found my first teacher in New York in the year 2000.
Who was that?
John Tamayo is a Colombian guy who had a school called Atmananda Yoga, sort of a hybrid of Ashtanga and Iyengar, and phenomenal teacher. Really, he was humorous. He was very deep in his practice, but was very personable and funny, but also could really read people. He really could like look at someone's body, their posture, and give information about what's would be going on, even on a mental level. Like he just had really, I think, a deep skill with yoga. And so I studied with him at a friend's referral, and then later went to India and studied a bit there for a few months, various cities. I was kind of hopping around. I didn't stay at one yoga studio or ashram, but I was actually doing research. I was doing video production back then. So I was shooting yogis and sadhus and scholars on yoga philosophy at that time. This was 2005.
Wow.
And this is a sort of docudrama film or documentary that never got produced, but perhaps one day will, because I still have amazing footage from that trip.
Oh, that's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Nice, nice.
So I did my own studies as well as I was studying with John. And John essentially, I wasn't intending on a conscious level to be a yoga teacher, but soon after I got back from India, he essentially gifted me with the yoga teacher training. I bumped into him in the street one day. Like I said, I was doing video production back then. I was with my friend who's a filmmaker, indie filmmaker, Joshua, and we bumped into John, and he's like, "Oh, Salim, I've been wanting to do some video stuff of my, to promote the studio. would you consider a barter? Like we can do a yoga teacher training for some video stuff. He had us come in a couple weeks later and shoot like maybe 3, 4 hours of footage. I don't think we even edited that footage. And he gifted me, this yoga teach, it's probably $5,000 in New York at that time,
Yeah.
studios in Soho.
Yeah.
But that's who he was. He would give things. He would just give freely if because he also saw I was practicing seriously by that time, 4 or 5 years. I knew his sequence, and that was my main interest was for me to bring it home. As soon as I started taking classes, I started practicing at home right away. And so I learned the sequence very quickly because I was doing that. I was practicing probably more at home than classes and going to classes regularly. And it really did help my capoeira practice, of course. So
That's
he
cool,
gifted
Salim.
me that, and that led me into, well, I should probably use this. And I was already a teacher. I was teaching
Yeah.
capoeira. I've always
Yeah.
worked with youth
Yeah.
since I was 14 years old. I've been, like a counselor in training. Since then, I've been working with youth.
Man,
So then teaching yoga kind of came naturally.
that's so cool. You're the first person that I met that has used the terminology that you were gifted a yoga training certificate. And that makes me think perhaps that could be a really good way to do it. Perhaps
Yeah.
those of us that have the, say, credentialization to hand a certificate to somebody, to just randomly, when you see somebody that is exhibiting a certain level of love or appreciation and dedication to the practice, to just then come up to them and say, here, I have this gift for you. I just want to hand you this. Wow. What an
Yeah.
interesting concept. Yeah,
Jonte would do that. He was that kind of person. He
that's really
wouldn't think
cool.
about it. He's the type who would do it on the spot. Like if he was
Yeah,
motivated,
yeah.
like it wouldn't even be he lived like that. He was very
That's
spontaneous.
awesome.
So he's the kind of person who'd just be like, "Do you want to do a teacher training? Like, come." Or
Yeah,
he'd actually be like, "Come, you should do a teacher training with me." And somehow people would just, they of course wouldn't refuse.
that's
But
so
that's how
cool.
he would frame it, and it would happen.
That's awesome, Salim. For the listener that may have never heard the word capoeira, can you please give us a definition and or a few stories so that we understand what capoeira is?
Sure. Capoeira is an Afro-Brazilian martial art that was established by primarily the Angolans and Congolese who were brought to Brazil through the transatlantic slave trade. So the roots of it are martial forms coming out of Central West Africa, but also was influenced by different ethnic groups further north in West Africa that were also enslaved. And they essentially, we like to call it the art of liberation, the art of resistance. And it brings together music, percussive music, call and response songs. It's the physical movements are very graceful, very circular. It's practiced within a circle, which we call a hoda. And I also refer to it as a ritual as well. And so it's a martial practice that has a lot of dance elements into it, and of course the musical component, and it's very rhythmic. And so it's taken on many different incarnations and forms over the centuries. It's responded to, in a sense, what the need was. So at times it would show up as a more aggressive or violent practice. If always self-defense within it. At times it was more the ritual aspect, and it still can kind of sort of show up as is needed. But the way we practice today, I'd say over the course of the last century, we actually call it the jogo de capoeira, which means the game of capoeira. We don't refer to it as a fight. We say people are playing capoeira, not sparring or fighting. So that's the language we use. And that reflects a certain ethos and a quality that you can have this martial practice that's playful, where there's levity that's sort of self-regulating within the circle so that there's a balance and so that it's, in a sense, controlled. And it's a really beautiful form that has responded to, that's sort of, I think, transmutes, or historically has transmuted this horrific experience into this beautiful art.
Wow, well said. Very cool. And so I'm curious, what similarities do you see between capoeira and yoga? Like you had made mention earlier, you said that I first came in contact with yoga through watching someone practice. Then you were able to read a little bit of a philosophical, say from Sri Muktanand or Swami Muktananda. Um, and then you said, then I was able to experience like a hatha yoga or a postural practice. In the world of capoeira, can it be separated into categories like this where capoeira has a philosophical school, but then it has a movement school? Is it all intertwined? Because I feel like yoga has kind of a similar element of where we could just say, I'm just going to study yoga philosophy. I'm not going to
Yeah,
touch any of the asana at all. And or
yeah,
we could go the other way where we have like all these exercise clubs where it's like, no, we're just doing asana. We don't want to hear about Atman and Brahman and all these different concepts.
right.
So I'm curious, how does the capoeira world structure its dissemination of knowledge and understanding in similarity or difference to yoga?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that in that way. And there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of similarities of movement, I think, in terms of the movement aesthetic, looking at this graceful movement. In capoeira, we don't, for example, this sort of core principle is that we don't really block. It's more about evasion, getting out of the way. And also, it's a dynamic, the movement aspect is about a conversation between two people more than just attack defense. It's sort of, we sometimes say it's a more of a question answer, but a dialogue, a corporal dialogue between two people
That's
where
cool.
you may or may not touch. It's not definitive one way or the other. It really depends on the nature of the game that's being played and the two people who are coming in. You can have a softer game that's more playful and you're showing your attacks but not executing. You can have a more aggressive game. Um, so there's that aspect of grace in movement. And rhythm. I think yoga at times, certainly vinyasa practice, can be rhythmic in its own way. When we talk about flow, there's a sort of rhythm that if you're a teacher, if you're a practitioner, then there's sort of a physical narrative that happens over the course of the class, but there can be a sort of rhythm to it. Maybe you're starting off a little bit slowly, and the rhythm might be more internal, might be more with your breathing. And then you may have, the practice may pick up in pace and it may come back down. We've talked to yoga teachers know this, that there's sort of like what's sort of where are the peaks, or how are you structuring your class in terms of, bringing the pace up or slowing it down over the course of the class. Capoeira very much has the same sort of movement narrative over the course of the game, but it's in conversation with someone else.
That's
So
cool.
there's that aspect. But if you were to see the movements, then you'll see we're on our hands a lot. So there are a lot of inversions that happen in capoeira. And particularly the practice and lineage that I teach and practice, called Capoeira Angola, a lot of the movements are low to the ground. So there are also a lot of movements where you're, supporting your full body. Some of the movements are literally the same. You might be supporting your body, like kind of on your elbow, or these lower movements that are happening, but it's a bit typically more fluid. So it would be more like a vinyasa type movement that's happening. And I'd say more circular movements in capoeira than what are typically taught in yoga, where we have a lot of linear movement, and holding postures, or
Yeah.
certainly linear forms in the body.
Yeah.
There's some exception to that, but a lot of times we're kind of looking for those lines and extension in asana practice.
That's really cool. I like the fact that you're bringing up the component of like question and answer. And so you're
Yeah.
saying that that sort of call response or question answer component is all happening without language. It's happening. It sounds to me more from like a body language. Is that correct? Is
That's how I would describe it. Yes.
is the
And
musical component giving any sort of direction, or what is the purpose of the song beyond creating a rhythm that you would be moving to? Is there any sort of information that's conveyed through the lyrical part?
absolutely. So within the capoeira circle, music is the foundation. In fact, you don't start moving until you've been sort of given permission by the percussive orchestra and the one person who's guiding the circle as well, who's usually on a specific instrument. This is an African-based instrument. It's a single string bow instrument. We call it berimbau, with a gourd on it. And you'll see this instrument exists in multiple ethnic groups in Africa as well. So this is the descendant of these African instruments, but you also would see similar instruments in parts of Asia and other places. So the music is the foundation. It dictates the pace of the game. The songs are very instrumental. They give instruction. So they're not separate, and they're not, they have meaning. And they have meaning not just broadly have meaning, but also have meaning in terms of what's happening inside the circle and how the two players are engaging each other. So the songs will typically give sort of instruction, guidance, warnings, also reverence to ancestors or older capoeira masters who have passed away. And so this starts to move into the spiritual foundation of the practice, because capoeira is based in different African-based spiritual traditions or broader sort of philosophies, particularly coming out of Central West Africa, where music is also is the centerpiece of, your healing practice, your spiritual practice. It's not separate. It's not a separate thing. In fact, typically in Africa, it's through music and dance that people are creating and generating spiritual connection, where you might be, in Africa, a lot of African spiritual traditions where you might be connecting with ancestors or calling them down or receiving them. This can come into the capoeira space and certainly informs how it's structured. Yeah.
That's cool, man. Oh my gosh. All right, I'm going to try to lay this out. So have you heard the storyline, yoga forming in India, yoga coming to the West, Westerners embracing it, getting really into it, going back to India, and sometimes Indians kind of curious, how come these Westerners are so into the yoga? I took yoga in college and it was cool and all, but I want to get a degree and be professional and become a doctor, a lawyer. And this yoga thing, it's interesting. It's a part of our culture. It's been a part of our culture for so long that there's this curiosity about, I remember going to India and why are you here? To study yoga. That's interesting. Why? Why would you want to come and practice yoga? What's that? What's that all about? And me thinking, well, doesn't everybody here just absolutely really into yoga? And they're like, well, I mean, yoga's cool and all. I took a class in college and stuff, but they were just kind of curious why I was so interested in yoga. Now, in terms of capoeira, having roots in Africa, maybe flowering in Brazil,
Yes.
learning, studying, going back to Africa and keeping it alive. What are you finding? What sort of reaction are you getting from the African culture or the culture in relation to, are they interested why this American guy is now wanting to practice capoeira? I don't know. I'm just curious, what sort of reaction you get and how prevalent and popular is it there now? And are you having to have to work hard to reignite that spark, or is that spark already so strong there that you're falling into its power there? Or I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but did that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I mean, you brought up a lot of very interesting ideas and questions, and I think you have a good insight into what's happening. Interestingly, in terms of this experience of capoeira coming full circle, which it certainly has, and I personally feel very honored and, in a sense, perhaps chosen to be a representative, to be one of the facilitators of bringing this African base form that traveled through the transatlantic, through this horrific experience, and created this beauty as well, but also resilience and struggle and everything that's within capoeira. I mean, we're the movements we're doing, people were doing centuries ago, but the context was completely different, right? Like they needed to, it was a survival method. And now we have the privilege of being able to still keep that history within our songs, within the movements we do, but we're not in that same condition.
Yeah.
Though we still think about how can we use capoeira to address certain forms of oppression today. That's very much in the conversation within certain sectors, certain parts of the capoeira community, not all of it. You have many different, like with yoga, many different expressions of it. So coming back to this now experience of coming full circle, and sort of one of the things I heard you ask was sort of how am I received as well? And also how it's being experienced by Africans here. So I teach in a slum community called Kibera. That's the term that's used here. One of the terms. Informal settlement is another term that a lot of NGOs and scholars use. I think that being in Kenya, first off, sort of post-colonial Africa, there's sometimes somewhat of a disconnect between people and their own culture. There is sometimes a suppression that can happen because of, I would say, in my opinion, this deferment at times to Western thought, religion, and this deferment to the West or the British or whomever as the ones who are either intelligent or have power. So this disempowerment that happened through the colonial process, right? And I mean, English is the national language here. We can look at that as an example. It's not Kiswahili, it's not Kikuyu. There are 43 ethnic groups in Kenya. So this sort of underscores my point that there is somewhat of a disconnect culturally in some ways. When I bring capoeira into a slum, so one piece is that the youth that I work with already culturally embody a lot of the principles we teach in capoeira. So in Kibera, respect for elders, like the kids are not, I've taught in a lot of spaces in the US. I mean, in different communities, some of the areas I taught in, kids couldn't care less, about the teachers. They'll say whatever. That doesn't happen in Quebec. There's certain core principles. And this also connects back to what I was saying earlier about what the value I see in raising my children here. These sort of values and morals. So that's already in place. The respect for elders, like, being able to, be patient in a learning process is already in place with the youth there. They're not in the same sort of rush to have everything. They don't have smartphones, but that's not the only reason. They also just understand time in a different way, for example. And so now bringing capoeira back to one of this, so we wouldn't necessarily say Kenya is the main source, but we can say Bantu culture is one of the core roots of capoeira, and Bantu culture is the primary broad ethnic family that's here in Kenya. One of them, not the only one. You have Nilotic, you have Kushites as well in Kenya. So to me, teaching now in Kibera, the youth are already starting at a level that's sort of further along than most of the kids I taught in the US, because the principles of capoeira they're already living a lot of them culturally. Now introducing the capoeira, it's sort of, my experience has been that it kind of ignites this thing that's already within them that sometimes they haven't had the opportunities to express in this way. So it's sort of like not only do they claim it, I think they understand it as theirs in a really essential way. And it is. And that's what I'm saying, is it actually is theirs. And now I'm bringing it back to them, this thing that's this disconnect. And they're really, it's really igniting something very special within who they're becoming as people. Yeah, so it's a very special, and to me, a very sacred sort of process, is helping facilitate this reconnection. And yes, as somebody from the African diaspora, it also makes sense that it's my charge to come, share some of the learning that's happened through these last few hundred years. And because Capoeira carries this very special message, and to deliver this culture, I mean, Capoeira to me is a culture, back to these youth that have had this disconnect from their own culture in certain ways.
Wow. I mean, that is amazing, Salim. And
I think so.
it's pretty amazing to think about, right? Like just the passage of time,
Yeah.
history, how it's evolving, full circle.
Yeah.
Wow. And to be
And
able
if I
to,
could say one other thing
yeah,
on
please,
this,
please.
this was also, you could say, foretold or envisioned or dreamt about by a lot of the older masters. We have so many
Whoa.
songs about returning to Africa.
Like a prophecy, so to speak, of
It's
we
in the
see.
music of capoeira, it is. I mean, Angola specifically, there are a lot of songs about Angola, but in general, the sentiment of a longing for Africa is very prominent in capoeira in general and capoeira music. Because of, I think, sort of various things, including economics, there are not a lot of capoeira masters who have come to Africa and invested in bringing capoeira here. You'll see it much more prominent in Europe, in Asia, in a lot of other places where people have more capacity to make money from it. So, ironically, we sing about it a lot, but I think it takes a certain investment in Africa to sort of, to bring the capoeira into this space.
Yeah.
And there are not a lot of people who have done that for all
Wow.
the reasons.
Well said. I recently read a book called Infidel by a woman named Ayan Hirsi Ali. Have you ever?
Yes. I haven't read the
Wow.
book. I'm familiar with her.
Wow.
And so I married into a Somali Kenyan family. So my kid's mom is Somali Kenyan. And so, yeah, I've been, put
Y-
on to a lot of different authors. And I know that her work brought up a lot of controversy within the Somali community. I don't
Oh,
know her work well enough to know the details, but I know that there are a lot of mixed feelings. I'll put it that way within the
I think
Somali
she
community.
brings up mixed feelings in the Netherlands, in the US. I mean, she's such a powerhouse. I mean,
Mm,
I'm so inspired by her. I think it's a phenomenal book. So, I guess
read her.
a question I'd like to ask you, since you have your feet on the ground there and you're deeply involved in the culture and community, what role does Islam play in your experience with interaction with the children that you're teaching capoeira? What what religious and cultural or spiritual backgrounds are you interfacing in your experience of teaching capoeira?
Religiously, Kenyan is predominantly Christian. And then there is a strong Islamic influence as well, particularly through the Swahili culture. And that's the culture that was established on the coast of Kenya through the Indian Ocean trade or the spice trade. People sometimes refer to it as where people from the Middle East, from India, as far as China, have historically been in regular trade through the Indian Ocean with East Africa. And the result of this was the emergence of Swahili culture, which brings all of these things together. When you look at people on the coast, particularly two of the major Swahili settlements, which were Lamu Island in Kenya and Zanzibar off of Tanzania, you see a lot of these influence, even in terms of how the people look, but also the food, the language. Swahili language is a hybrid trade language that combines Arabic, Bantu, Spanish, and sort of incorporates these different things. So, but back to your question, yeah. So I would say where I teach capoeira specifically, We have mostly probably Christian youth, but then also I have Muslim students as well.
Mhm.
Where when I teach yoga, it's a very different demographic. It's more of the international Kenyan mixed with the international expat community in Nairobi, which there is a large one. And so that's that community primarily when I'm teaching yoga at studios, and there are multiple studios and spaces in Nairobi.
Can you tell me what teaching yoga in Nairobi is like?
Sure. I'm teaching less than I used to. I used to have regular classes a few years ago, and because of some of my work with Synergy and my focus on the work we're doing, which is rooted more in retreats, and Francisco leads also Thai bodywork certifications. So I teach on retreats when I'm there. And then more recently, though I'm not keeping regular classes in Nairobi, I have been doing a workshop called Yoga Acoustic, which is a Synergy yoga practice. That's our yoga school, as you know, Synergy Yoga.
Yoga acoustic, like acoustic, but yoga in place of yoga acoustic, like acoustics, like hearing?
Yeah, so I'm doing a yoga practice with Kenyan singer-songwriters playing live music.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's great.
Amazing.
It's a lot of fun. So, because I'm a huge music fan, and I also am a creative at heart. So, you know, I've always had playlists when I practice anyway, typically. Like, I don't practice quietly. If you come to my class, you know that.
Uh,
So I just started I was like, you know what? I have a lot of musician friends. I want to, also give a spotlight to some of the amazing artists here that don't always get attention, but also these are singer-songwriters whose music, I mean, there's obviously a long tradition of yoga and music as well. And so this is the way I'm expressing it in a contemporary space.
wow. Cool, Salim. I noticed that you have a workshop or a retreat coming up called Bush to Beach. I think you said you're going to do a back-to-back 10-day adventures. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm curious, what is this with you and Francisco? Are you guys doing this together? Actually, on that note, so everyone listening, I did an interview with Francisco Morales, which is episode number 232. And that's how I got introduced to you, Salim, because you guys are partnered up through synergy.yoga. Everyone can find you in the links. They can click and see your website. So I'm excited to have this follow up or this opportunity to meet you as well. I had such a great time talking with Francisco. You guys are a powerhouse duo here. I'm curious, how did this retreat experience that you're curating come to be?
Well, Bush to Beach, I envisioned years ago, and probably pre-pandemic. And then we went through a few years where everything switched. We continued doing retreats, Synergy, and me and Francisco actually started working together essentially at the start of the pandemic. And we were doing online classes, but a whole online platform actually for Synergy. And then we started doing retreats pretty early on. I mean, we were, maybe a year into the pandemic, not even, when we started doing retreats down in Peru. So even back then, I had envisioned, I had done some retreats in Kenya before working with Synergy, but I also, I started increasing them. I did a couple as well. Me and Francisco facilitated a couple of retreats in Lamu Island, that first Swahili settlement in East Africa that I mentioned earlier. So Bush to Beach was in my imagination from years ago, is the idea of curating an experience where people could, the bush being safari, and a lot of people come to Kenya for the animals. They don't necessarily, unless you're better informed, know that much about the culture necessarily. So that's a huge part of the tourist experience in Kenya in general. So I thought that the idea of creating a space for that, for people to have the bush, the safari experience, but then also to have more of the cultural experience, the Swahili cultural experience in Lamu specifically, would be really great to have a more broad experience for people, because this is a trip that someone might curate themselves anyway, to have a more expansive or a broader experience of what Kenyan culture is like. So we decided to curate that basically, and we needed to give ourselves a little bit more time than our typical retreats in order to do that, because there's a domestic flight involved, and you're also moving to actually three core locations. I mean, you arrive in Nairobi, and then we go to one of the national parks. There are numerous national parks in Kenya. So we go to one that's more easily accessible driving wise. So if you go to Masai Mara, for example, you might be 6 hours in the car. But this is after like an international flight. So that to me was a bit intense. So I chose a park that was a little more accessible and is also beautiful. I've been to multiple times, called Nakuru National Park. So we have 3 nights there at Nakuru, and then just one transition day back to Nairobi. And then we take a domestic flight to Lamu Island, which
Wow.
is just this pristine island that's culturally rich. There are no cars on the island. There are these beautiful dhow boats that have been made over the centuries. They're just these gorgeous, beautiful. You can just lay out with this inlaid kind of sofas, and they'll prepare your meal on the boat, and you can have a day trip or snorkel and hang out.
Wow.
And then we do a tour of Lamu town as well, which is a UNESCO heritage site. And so, yeah, we have multiple experiences over the course of the Bush to Beach retreat. But this is, something that I thought of years ago. And Francisco is always super supportive and loves Kenya and Lamu as well. So I'm looking forward to having him back. He'll also be doing a Thai bodywork certification when he's here, when the retreats are done. So we've done 2 of them already with him leading those certifications, and we'll do our 3rd at the end of next month. And so we're doing 2 of them next month.
That's amazing. Are you incorporating capoeira and yoga classes within that retreat, or is there so much to do in relation to doing the wildlife viewing, introducing different cultural components, and traveling? Are you also weaving in these aspects too?
Yes, we always do yoga classes. There won't be any capoeira on this. And sorry about that.
No worries.
So we always do yoga classes, and Francisco teaches Thai bodywork, interactive workshops as well.
Very cool. Very cool.
And so, we have those elements. And then Francisco usually also does partner stretching as well. So we have yoga typically in the morning, and we may have an evening class as well. But they're not yoga retreats. We call them synergy journeys. So they're more cultural experiences, geographical experiences in the areas where we travel, which is Sacred Valley, Peru, Tulum, Mexico, and Kenya.
Nice.
Pardon.
No worries, Salim. I'll keep talking for you for a little while. No, okay. So earlier in the conversation, you had made mention that you potentially, maybe, you don't know where you're going to be, say, 20 years from now. Do any of us really know where we're going to be 20 years from now? But I'm curious, what is your future vision for Synergy Yoga, Synergy.yoga? What would what are some of the other plans that you have brewing because obviously being a creative person and you have global passion for culture and global travel, do you have any other concepts that you're working on?
Yeah, both me and Francisco have facilitated and organized festivals before, both wellness festivals and music events as well. So we're talking about the possibility of that. I've done a couple of wellness festivals here in Nairobi, separate from Synergy, and now thinking about doing a yoga acoustic festival here in Nairobi, 2026. Francisco has done numerous festivals as well, wellness festivals, and we're talking about what that would look like in Peru. So
Nice.
early stages of conversations, partnering with people possibly that he's worked with before in Peru. And so bringing back a festival that he had done formerly. in the north coast of Peru. But again, these are early stages. So yeah, so that's one thing. Yoga teacher training has been in and out of our conversations over the years. Francisco's facilitated numerous trainings. I've never led a yoga teacher training. We decided that it wasn't a priority, partly because the retreat piece of our business has really become a centerpiece of what we're doing the next couple years. It's really the core of what we're doing right now. And the model is that we're primarily partnering with US based yoga schools or partners who are bringing most of the clients. And then we end up partnering with them, facilitating the retreats. And this is really great for us because we're able to share these experiences with a broader range of people than just strictly the folks Synergy has in our direct community. And also it's just a more sustainable model that we're not, the retreat business is definitely tricky and a bit of a hustle like any entrepreneurial venture. But obviously retreat is a specific niche in terms of who has the resources to do it and who, and who would be, and then within that, who's interested in travel or interested in culture and wellness in these specific places. So we've been very fortunate that we are now collaborating with some really wonderful partners in this past couple years, but also in the couple years ahead. And this Bush to Beach, for example, is with one of our core partners, Pedro, with Next Level Yoga Community out of Florida, your area. And and so most of the retreats, thinking all of them next year, yes, are with partners.
Very cool. Amazing. That's a great idea. Have you had any difficult experiences where you had people from a different country who are not very culturally savvy that you found yourself having to like buffer what's the right way to say this? I guess culture shock. Like sometimes if I grew up in America and I've never been out of the country and all of a sudden I land in Africa and my senses are just kind of like overloaded because I'm having a little bit of culture shock. Have you had any experiences where you've had to like obviously everybody and everyone, you're probably the medium in between the culture that that you're blending these two cultures together. Do you have any stories for me in relation to like a specific challenge that you've encountered?
That I want to share.
That maybe the person that was on the retreat won't feel like you're talking about them? No, I'm kidding. But I mean, it's just an interesting thing because, like I had people say to me once, Todd, it'd be really cool if you we'd like to go to India with you. And my experience in India is like, I'm so overwhelmed when I'm in India. I can't imagine trying to be the liaison between these folks that have never been out of the country when I'm already wigging out on how like to deal with the food that I ate. And now I'm trying to find a place that I can, I don't know, hang out. So I'm just curious, like, that's a big job. Kudos to you for being able to do that. I mean, you don't have to throw anything under the bus, but I'm just curious, how do you handle all that?
Good questions. I think, our situation is a little bit different because Francisco's Peruvian. So when folks come to Peru, it's through the guidance and support of someone who's from Peru. And in my case, I've been living in Kenya for 11 years now. So I'm familiar, which is different than, I can imagine this scenario that you were describing. You're like, I'm just trying to hold it together myself. And now I got to hold space for all these people. That can be intense. So that's how we're positioned. And then the third location of Tulum, Mexico, Francisco's led retreats there for several years and is very familiar with Tulum and really saw Tulum from probably before it became what it is now, where it was, still more of the small town that it was 20 years ago to, this other sort of developed area, which has, positive and negative, I would say, or at least, different challenges anyway that come up with when you have that level of tourism, but also type of tourism. So, yeah,
And
so that's,
you're kind of getting to the point where if you get a bunch of people that just want to come and do drugs and party, that doesn't really help the community. It brings
in
money. It brings
Tulum,
money,
you
but
mean,
it
or
kind of
in any space.
yeah.
Exactly. It's right. It's so right. What happens to a community or a town when, when it sort of evolves or changes into somewhere that's very, where it might be a party town or accessible to Americans, who kind of want to go have this certain experience, or, how does that affect the local culture and community? What's the middle ground? So these questions come up. But back to your question though about so it's very rare. So that's the I think I was giving context to what a synergy experience is like in terms of people coming to a place where either I'm not from Kenya, but I'm familiar with Nairobi and Kenya at this point, and you can comfortably have held space for people who are coming here. And sometimes it helps to have someone from the outside who's lived there for a while but is American, who
I see
they
what,
can connect with
yeah.
in that way
That's like
culturally, but
both sides.
also
Yeah.
has, yeah. And Francisco similarly, I mean, he's from Peru, but also grew up partially in the US. So he, speaking to Americans and the concerns of Americans is something we're both very familiar with. That being said, there certainly have been situations where people have had, and it's very. I'll say this: it's extremely rare. I mean, I'm thinking of like one or two cases out of how many retreats have we've brought at this point hundreds of people to these places at this point, where people or said person um, just, I think it was not in some ways sort of wasn't able to get out of that American mental emotional bubble to be able to genuinely experience the place where they were. That's and that I think that experience is equally important for someone, that where you live is not the world. Not everyone thinks like you or looks like you or deals with things the same way as you. Now, when this comes up, it's our job to, it's a delicate balance between coddling and allowing someone to have their experience. Where do you as a facilitator, what's your role? Yeah. And I think usually it's somewhere in the middle. That yes, it is our job to keep our guests safe. That's one thing. And what does that mean now? Right? What does it mean to keep someone's, in a sense, you can't keep someone always emotionally safe if they are going through whatever challenges they might have going into a different cultural environment. Sometimes you need to be shaken up a little bit in order to grow, right? Like there's no growth without some discomfort. And you don't want to just go to another country and experience everything that you experience in your everyday. That's the point of travel, is to actually break out of that and learn, right? That's how you learn from other people, or, oh, they do things this way. So I think I would say my opinion and observation, if it's possible for me to be objective, is that I think we do a good job of tending that balance, and allowing people to have their experiences. Of course, it's essential that people are physically safe and kind of health things that may come up. That's number one, especially going to high altitude, for example, or going to another country where there's just different bacteria and what. So yeah, that's sort of our job, is
That's
to
cool.
understand those nuances and be supportive, and also allow people to have their experiences. But in general, that's been a big rarity. I can
Yeah.
think of like one experience where
Yeah.
someone really had a very challenging time in one of our
Yeah.
retreats.
Man, that's so
Yeah.
cool. I really appreciate you giving some of the nitty gritty details because it's it's
Yeah.
fascinating to me. It takes a lot of work. I'm really inspired by both the work that you and Francisco are doing. It's really cool. I love seeing the partnership and the community that you guys have created. I really am grateful to meet both of you, and I think you guys are doing an amazing job. So
Oh,
kudos to you guys for having the vision and then following through. And I do appreciate and understand the challenge of the entrepreneurial aspect and
Oh
you
yeah.
being honest about it, that like, yeah, it sounds amazing for those of us that are like stuck in a like 9 to 5 job going, I wish I could do something else and be out there in the world. The reality of taking a leap like what you guys are doing and doing a business like this obviously probably does have some challenges, but it sounds like you guys are navigating it really
And
well.
I think we are, and it helps to have each other. It helps to have support. I really like partnering with people.
Yeah.
And I also like kind of doing certain things on my own. But as far as business goes, having a partner or partners, even when, of course, it presents its own challenges as well, just any relationships and dynamics and decision making and understanding how to work with someone effectively, and getting out of sometimes our own way in terms of, when we're challenged, well, I do things this way, they do things this way, what's the middle ground? So that's always that negotiation in any relationship. If you're married, you're going through this on a daily, weekly, or whatever basis. If you have children, you're I do. I'm a dad as well. I got 2 teenagers. You're negotiating, especially as they get older, and they have opinions and choices to make.
Oh yeah.
So we're always negotiating in community or with people, whether that's in a business or otherwise. So for me, there's certainly and synergy. The name synergy reflects this, that we're more powerful in community or as in partnership than we are alone. That's really who we are as a business, and I think we're living into that both in our partnership as co-directors and also in our partnerships with the people we're working with in retreats.
Nice, Salim. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day, sharing these stories with us. We really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with? Any, beyond what you've already shared, inspiration, motivation, or final tidbit of Salim knowledge?
Words of wisdom
Words
from
of
Salim.
wisdom. Yeah, yeah. The title of your book, it's coming, man.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I don't know about all that.
I mean,
Well, a
yeah,
pleasure
yeah.
being here. Yeah, certainly a pleasure being here. I enjoy, I appreciate, it's funny because I think that we were doing this sort of thing a lot during the pandemic. Me and Francisco, through Synergy, had a weekly Sangha at one point every Sunday. We were having these kind of conversations with people from all sorts of different backgrounds, not just yoga. It was wellness. It was it was activism. It was social. It was culture. So it's nice to be back in conversation and to meet people. We have this amazing technology now. We can press a button and have a meaningful conversation with someone. And I think that, I'm just putting attention on that the value sometimes of having a conversation with someone and sharing ideas, and the value in listening as well. That's actually something that I think in some ways was probably heightened during the pandemic because everyone was online and meeting people from different places and sharing ideas in different ways. And so I appreciate being able to come back to that in the context of this podcast. And I just encourage us to continue to have genuine conversation and sometimes talk to someone who may have a different perspective or a different life experience. And I just think there's so much growth opportunity and the opportunity for genuine human connection when we do that. So thanks for having me on. I really feel this is a great conversation.
Thank you, Salim. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I hope to be able to join you one day in East Africa. That would be incredible.
Oh yeah, come on out.
Oh my gosh, I want to go when you guys are there, or if you're ever in Peru or one of the Maya Tulum, whichever potential venue. But it'd be incredible to
Yeah.
be with both of you guys and to learn and hang out with you. So I really thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you
Yeah.
in person in the future.
Likewise, brother.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
That was Salim Rollins, the co-director of Synergy Yoga, sharing his vision of healing through connection, movement, and community. I hope this conversation inspires you to think about yoga not just as a personal practice, but as a way of building bridges across cultures and hearts. To learn more about Salim's work, visit synergy.yoga or follow their upcoming retreats and teacher trainings around the globe. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with a friend who loves yoga, travel. You can find more conversations like this on nativeyogacenter.com or visit our YouTube channel, Native Yoga Toddcast. I have on all of the listening platforms. Wherever you're interacting with this episode, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Namaste. Native Yoga Toddcast is produced by myself. The theme music is dreamed up by Bryce Allen. If you like this show, let me know. If there's room for improvement, I want to hear that too. We are curious to know what you think and what you want more of, what I can improve. And if you have ideas for future guests or topics, please send us your thoughts to info@Native Yoga Center. You can find us at nativeyogacenter.com. And hey, if you did like this episode, share it with your friends, rate it and review, and join us next time.